You've done it 100 times. You pick up a rock, turn it over in your hand, don't see anything shiny, and toss it back in the creek. It felt like the right call. It wasn't. Some of the ugliest, most ordinary-looking rocks in that stream bed are hiding real gold inside them, and you've probably thrown a small fortune back into the water without ever knowing it. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Gold isn't rare. Not nearly as rare as people think. What's rare is knowing how to read a rock. Most folks were taught to hunt for a glint, a sparkle, a flash of yellow. But the gold that stays in the ground, the gold that survives millions of years, almost never announces itself like that. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to hand you 5 common rocks that carry gold inside them. For each one, I'll show you exactly what it looks like, why the gold got trapped there, the simple field check you can do in 5 seconds, where in the creek to find it, and what it might be worth. And I'm saving the 5th for last on purpose because it's the one nearly everyone walks past, and it's the one that's fooled more prospectors than any other rock on Earth. Stay to the end for that. So let me ask you something right now before we go any further, and drop your answer in the comments. How many times do you figure you've picked up a rock, seen nothing, and chucked it back without a second thought? Be honest. I want to know how long you've been doing that. Now, before I show you the first rock, you need to understand one thing, because this is where almost everybody goes wrong. Gold doesn't float around loose in the world by itself. It gets born deep underground, carried up by superheated water moving through cracks in the rock. Geologists call this hydrothermal fluid. That water is loaded with dissolved minerals, and as it rises and cools, it drops its cargo inside the cracks and veins of whatever rock is around it. Gold rides along with that water, so when the water cools and hardens, the gold gets sealed inside the host rock, locked in tight, often as particles too small to see with your naked eye. That's the whole secret right there. Gold lives inside other rocks. It's a passenger, not a driver. And the rocks it rides inside are usually plain, dull, and easy to overlook because the gold is buried in the matrix, not sitting on the surface waving at you. So when you're standing in a creek looking for a shiny yellow nugget, you're looking for the 1 in 1,000 exception. The rule is gold hidden inside ordinary stone. Once that clicks, you stop hunting for sparkle and you start hunting for the right kind of rock. That single shift is the difference between an empty vial and a good day. Let's get into the 5. The first one is quartz, and I know, everybody says look for quartz. But here's what shocks most people. It's not white quartz you want. Pure milky white quartz is usually barren. The quartz that carries gold is the ugly stuff. Look for quartz that's stained rusty orange, brown, or has streaks of dirty red running through it. That coloring comes from iron. And why does that matter? Because the same hot water that carried gold up from below also carried iron. Where you see that iron staining, that reddish-brown bleeding through the white, you're looking at a rock that had mineral-rich water moving through it. That rust is a receipt. It's proof the plumbing worked. The gold might be sitting right alongside that iron in tiny specks, sometimes visible if you look at the fractures in good light, sometimes so fine you'd never see it. Quartz veins have produced some of the richest gold on record. California's Mother Lode was essentially a giant system of gold-bearing quartz veins stretching over 120 miles, and it gave up tens of millions of ounces. In the field, look for chunks of quartz down in the creek that show that iron staining, especially in cracks and along the edges. The beginner mistake here is grabbing every pretty white crystal you see and ignoring the rusty, broken pieces. You've got it backwards. The gold is in the ugly rock. And if you think rusty quartz is deceptive, wait until you see what the second rock does, because it hides its gold behind a color you'd swear had nothing to do with treasure. That second rock is ironstone, and this one gets tossed back more than almost anything. Ironstone is dark. It's heavy for its size. It ranges from deep reddish brown to almost black, and it often has a rough, crusty, pockmarked surface that looks like nothing worth keeping. But that weight is the first clue. Iron-rich rock is dense, and gold loves to travel with iron ides. When gold-bearing rock sits on the surface for thousands of years, the softer minerals weather away and the iron oxidizes into a hard, dark cap. That cap can concentrate the gold that was already there. Prospectors in Australia's goldfields learned this the hard way and the rich way because some of the most productive ground in Western Australia was capped with this ironstone material, and men who cracked it open found gold laced right through it. In your creek, look for the dark, heavy, rusty rocks that feel too heavy for their size. Feel the weight in your palm. If it's noticeably heavier than an ordinary rock the same size, you keep it. The beginner mistake is judging by color. Dark equals boring, right? Wrong. Dark and heavy is exactly what you want. Hold that thought, because I need to pause for one quick thing. Quick pause here, and then we go right back to the rocks. Everything I just walked you through, the iron staining, the weight test, all of it, plus dozens more tricks like it, is inside the Gold Prospector's Bible, 2026 edition. 50 field-tested tricks to stop getting skunked. And right now it comes with the 30-day Skunk-Proof Roadmap completely free. A step-by-step 4-week plan to pick your ground, test smarter, and finally find your first real color. Links in the description, QR codes right there on your screen. This is the season you stop guessing where the gold is. Now let's get back to it. The third rock is schist, and this one surprises people because it doesn't look like a treasure chest at all. Schist is a layered, flaky rock. It looks like it's made of thin sheets pressed together, and it often shimmers with little flat reflective flakes. Now here's where you have to be careful, and I'll come back to those shiny flakes in a minute because they're a trap. Schist forms under intense heat and pressure deep in the earth, the exact conditions where gold-bearing veins get squeezed and folded into place. Where you find schist, you often find quartz veins cutting right through it, and those contact zones, where the schist meets the quartz, are prime real estate for gold. The gold concentrates along that boundary because that's where the hot fluids collected and cooled. The famous gold fields of the Sierra Nevada foothills sit in a region absolutely full of schist and slate cut by quartz. In the field, when you find flaky, layered schist in your creek, don't just move on. Look for where quartz is jammed into it, and pay close attention to those seams. The beginner mistake with schist is seeing all those glittery flakes and getting excited, thinking you've hit the jackpot. You haven't. Those flakes are almost always mica, and mica is worthless. That's our impostor rearing its head, and I promised I'd deal with him. So here's your 5-second check. Take that shiny flake and press your fingernail into it. Mica is soft. It'll flake, peel, and crumble like a fish scale. Real gold is soft too, but it won't crumble. It'll dent and smear. It stays in one solid piece. Mica also floats away in water. Gold sinks like a stone every single time. Remember that? Because our friend mica is going to show up again. Now, onto the fourth rock, and this is where the ground itself starts telling you the truth. The fourth rock is Conglomerate, and hardly anybody outside of serious geology gives it a second look. Conglomerate is basically nature's concrete. It's a bunch of rounded pebbles and stones all cemented together into one solid mass, like somebody poured gravel into cement and let it harden. It looks lumpy and busy and confusing. But think about what it actually is. Those rounded pebbles were once loose in an ancient riverbed, tumbling along, wearing smooth. And what else tumbles along in a riverbed and settles into the gravel? Gold. When an old river gets buried and cemented into rock over millions of years, any gold that was in that gravel gets locked inside the conglomerate forever. This is exactly how some of the greatest gold fields on the planet were formed. The Witwatersrand Basin in South Africa is ancient gold-bearing conglomerate, and it has produced more gold than any other place in human history, well over 1 billion ounces across its lifetime. Over 1 billion. All from cemented old riverbed rock. In your creek, look for that lumpy, pebbly, cemented-together rock and pay special attention to the darker bands and layers running through it. Because those darker layers often hold the heavier minerals, gold included. The beginner mistake here is dismissing conglomerate as just a boring jumble of glued-together gravel. That boring jumble is a fossilized river, and rivers are where gold goes to rest. Before I give you the fifth and best rock, let me be straight with you for a second. Look, I'll be straight with you. If you've watched this far, you already know more about reading rock than most folks who've been swinging a pan for years. Everything we're covering lives across 5 chapters in the Gold Prospector's Bible, 50 field-tested tricks, and it comes with a printable 10-minute stream-side checklist you can keep in your vest, and the 30-day roadmap that still comes free with the book right now. I honestly don't know how long that free gift stays in the bundle. If you've been watching these videos thinking this could finally be your season, this is the move. Links in the description below, QR codes on your screen. Make this the year you find your first real color. Alright, the 5th rock. The 5th rock is the one that fools nearly everyone, and it's called Gossan, though most prospectors just call it a rusty rock or an iron cap. Here's why almost nobody outside professional geology knows this one. Gossan looks like garbage. It's crumbly, rusty, spongy-looking rock riddled with holes and cavities, colored in ugly shades of red, brown, yellow, and orange. It looks diseased. It looks like something you'd never keep. And that is exactly why it's so valuable, because everyone throws it back. A Gossan is what forms at the very top of a mineral deposit. Deep down, there was a body of sulfide minerals, often carrying gold. Over millions of years, water and air worked down into it from the surface and slowly dissolved and rotted away the sulfides, leaving behind this rusty, honeycombed, iron-stained skeleton. Now here's the beautiful part. When those sulfides broke down and washed away, the gold stayed behind because gold doesn't dissolve. It just sits there in the leftover rusty rock, sometimes even more concentrated than it was before, gathered up in those cavities and holes. Prospectors across the American West and Nevada learned to hunt for Gossan specifically because a rusty cap on a hillside was a flag telling you there was a mineralized body underneath. Some of the biggest mines in Nevada were found by following Gossan at the surface down to the gold below. In the field, look for that rusty, cellular, holy rock with those little cavities and boxwork patterns, almost like a honeycomb or a sponge made of iron. Look inside the holes because that's where fine gold hides. The weight test works here too. A gold-bearing Gossan often feels heavier than it looks. The beginner mistake, and this is the big one, the one that sends people home with an empty vial after a full day on good ground, is seeing that ugly, rotten, rusty rock and being absolutely certain it's worthless. You look at it and your gut says trash. Your gut is wrong. That rotten-looking rock is the calling card of a gold deposit, and it's been sitting in creeks getting kicked aside for 150 years. Now you know better. Let me tell you a quick story that ties this all together. Back in 1869, in the little town of Mollyagul, Australia, 2 miners named John Deason and Richard Oates were working a claim that plenty of men had already given up on. They were down to almost nothing. On the 3rd of February, Deason struck something just a few inches below the surface with his pick. It turned out to be the largest gold nugget ever found, the Welcome Stranger, weighing in at over 2,300 troy ounces of gold. It was so big they had to break it into pieces just to weigh it because it broke the scales at the bank. And here's the part that matters for you. It was sitting barely below the surface, in ground other men had walked over and dismissed. 2 struggling miners on a played-out claim, and they hit the biggest one in history because they kept reading the ground when everyone else had quit. The gold wasn't hiding from them. It was hiding from the people who weren't looking properly. That's the whole lesson of these 5 rocks. The treasure is in the ordinary ground everyone else has given up on. Now think back to those glittery flakes I warned you about with the schist. Our impostor, Misa, catches people in Gossan and quartz too, sitting in the cracks, winking at you. So one more time, burn this in. Fingernail test. Mica crumbles and flakes like a dead leaf. Pyrite, fool's gold, the other great liar, is brittle and will crush and shatter under a hard point, and it's got sharp cubic shapes and a brassy tint that's too pale, too yellow-green. Real gold does none of that. It's soft, it's dense, it smears, it holds together, and it sinks. 5 seconds with your fingernail or a knife point, and you'll never be fooled again. That single check will save you 100 wasted trips. So here's what I want to know, and drop it in the comments below. Which of these 5 rocks have you found before, even if you had no idea at the time what you were holding? The rusty quartz, the heavy ironstone, the flaky schist, the cemented conglomerate, or that ugly honeycombed Gossan? Tell me, I read them. All right, let's bring it home. 25 minutes ago, you were the person who picks up a rock, sees no sparkle, and tosses it back in the water. Now you're not. Now you can spot rusty, iron-stained quartz and know the plumbing carried gold. You can heft a dark, heavy rock and read its weight instead of its color. You can find flaky schist and hunt the quartz seams cutting through it. You can look at a lumpy chunk of conglomerate and see a buried, ancient river full of settled gold. And most important, you can look at that rotten, rusty, honeycombed Gossan that everyone else throws back and recognize it for exactly what it is, the calling card of a gold deposit. You know the fingernail check that unmasks mica and pyrite in 5 seconds flat? That's real knowledge, and it goes with you into the field for the rest of your life. Here's the thing, though. Knowing 5 rocks is a start, and the ground has a lot more to tell you than 5 signs. So, next time you walk a riverbank, you don't want to be the person who steps over a fortune and keeps walking. Because I promise you that person is out there on your creek right now. If this helped you see the ground a little clearer, do me a favor and subscribe, because next time I'm going to show you how to read the bends and gravel bars in a creek, so you know exactly where the gold settles before you ever wet your pan. Until then, keep those ugly rocks. Good luck out there, gold hunter.